Hello, I'm Haeju from Go Inside Global.
Hi, I'm Haley Koo.
It's not an exaggeration to say that the 21st century is the era of meditation. The population of meditators is continuously increasing. It must be because meditation has positive effects on our body and mind.
That's right. Not only does meditation reduce stress, anxiety, and depression, it also has positive effects on brain functions, hormones, the immune system, and much more.
As scientific research on meditation becomes more active, various meditation centers are being established around the world. They have developed unique programs to promote healthy lives in their societies. So we will visit meditation centers around the world with Go Inside Global.
That's right, a world tour of meditation centers. 스님, are there a lot of meditation centers in the US?
Yes, there are many. Buddhism was introduced to the United States at the end of the 19th century. It's been about 100 years. It might be a short time, but a lot of meditation centers have been established throughout the United States, and they are growing enormously.
스님, where to first?
The first place I'd like to introduce is the Upaya Zen Center, founded by Rosh Joan Halifax.
The Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico is a Zen Buddhist community focused on integrating practice and social action, bringing together wisdom and compassion. They actively engage in various social activities to introduce Buddhism to the West. The heart of their practice is expressing their vows of the Bodhisattva path, providing compassion to people facing significant challenges, including those with illnesses and dying, incarcerated inmates, people experiencing homelessness, and refugee communities. The founder of Upaya Zen Center, Roshi Joan Halifax, is a disciple of Seungsan S님 and received her Dharma transmission from Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh. She is a globally renowned Zen master and medical anthropologist who has focused on death and life as central themes in her practice, leading her to create the Being with Dying project in the 1970s. Her teachings emphasize the interconnectedness of life and death.
Rosh Joan Halifax is one of the most respected leaders who is driving the scientific research of Buddhism and meditation in the United States. Not only as a Zen master, she is also vigorously active as a social activist, an author, and a pioneer in the field of end-of-life care.
스님, it seems that there are a lot of female teachers in American Buddhism.
Yes, that's right. One of the characteristics of American Buddhism is that there are many women, both as leaders and practitioners. They are making a significant contribution to gender equality. So you must be curious about the Upaya Zen Center and its programs. Now we are going to meet the founder of the center, Rosh Joan Halifax. Hello, how are you? It's so lovely to meet you.
It's so wonderful to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
So it's a great honor to be with you today. My name is Joan Halifax. I'm the abbot and head teacher at Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And currently, I actually am in the mountains in my hermitage. It's about an hour and a half northeast of the Zen Center, surrounded by 3 million acres of national forest.
Wow.
At about, as I said, 3,000 meters, and a very remote, high-altitude valley. Beautiful place, very quiet.
Wow, beautiful.
So we would like to begin by talking about the center. Can you please introduce the Upaya Zen Center to our viewers?
The Upaya Zen Center was founded in 1990. And it was deeply influenced by my many decades of work in socially engaged Buddhism. And also my Zen practice, which began in the mid-1960s. And as a result of my work as a social activist, also an anthropologist, and finally becoming a Buddhist teacher, it just felt like an imperative to create a place where people could both practice deeply and as well have training in what it was to serve others and also to address issues in our culture, in our society, related to structural violence and direct violence.
Okay, great. Thank you for your introduction. In Korea, most people study Buddhist teachings by reading Buddhist sutras or doing sound practice under the guidance of masters in the temple. So what do you do in your Upaya Zen Center? What is your approach in your center?
Well, we have an intimate residential community, and that community comes to the Zendo 3 times a day to practice.
Oh.
And then also we have many people in the wider community who come and practice, and both our residents and our lay community and our ordained community who don't live at the center engage in various projects, including cooking for those who are unsheltered, that is, the homeless in our area, working in the prison system, teaching meditation, working as well in recovery centers, and doing various other good works. And the point is to really understand the profound relationship between contemplative practice and social service and social action. I myself am a social activist, but also I engage in social service. As you know, I've worked in the area of death and dying since the early 1970s.
Yes.
And also started a project in the prison systems here in New Mexico, working with incarcerated individuals. So, this work in these settings that are very fraught has been, a really big influence in my life. And also in 1980, I began a project of working with clinicians, bringing clinicians into high altitude areas of the Himalayas who have no access to medical care.
Yeah.
So that project has been going on since 1981.
Wow.
And actually, a feature-length film has just been done of that work called Into the Heart of the Mountain by a remarkable Dutch filmmaker.
Really?
Which will go, yes, first to festivals and then be commercially released. Thank you. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for all the projects that you've been doing for the world and the wider community. I guess with all the technological advancement, we're now able to connect online, just like how we're doing today, and reach more people and impact more people's lives. I know that the Zen Center offers both online and offline programs. So what are some of the flagship programs that you offer at the center? And if people from Korea, come over to the center to visit, are they able to join as well?
So as many of us are aware that when the pandemic hit a little over 3 years ago, places like ours who had the resources went online. And as a result of that, thousands of people from all over the world became part of our community, which was wonderful because people in many parts of the world, including our own Zen Center, all of us were in lockdown. It was a great opportunity to practice and also to learn.
Right.
So we developed a very robust online presence. And that presence includes twice daily meditation practice, once weekly Dharma talks, and also training in our chaplaincy work. We have very robust chaplaincy training program. People all over the world have joined that program. Also a program for clinicians in care of the dying. And also 3 months a year of Ango, or of deep practice, in the spring, in the fall, and in the winter, where people have the opportunity for a month to study texts deeply, to engage in practice, to be in sesshin, in the intensive practice days, and so forth. Plus many other programs, including programs in trainings in environmental and social justice, and also haiku, the arts,
So
and
many-
upcoming
Yeah.
calligraphy with the great calligrapher Kazuaki Tanahashi.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. So you mentioned a lot of different kinds of volunteer programs and social engagement programs. So you also practice Zen meditation in your center. So could you please explain why this social participation is important for Buddhist practitioners?
Well, I actually consider Shakyamuni Buddha to have been a great social reformer. In fact, when he nourished the Sangha into being, he ended the caste system. He flattened out the social system, which was a very radical move on his part. He also, thanks to Ananda, ordained women. He ordained those who were deemed untouchables, the Dalits in the lowest caste in India. He even ordained a serial killer, Angulimala.
Yes.
And he was able to interact, with King Pasende and with other powerful religious figures of his time, but also also the wealthy, as we know from Anatta Pindika and Jetta Grove. But he was a person who, really lived as if we understand his life, in a very humble and close to the earth way. So he was basically a mendicant, a person without possessions, for 9 months a year, and then 3 months during Vasa, the community would come together to study and so forth. But he, from my point of view, and I think others agree with this, and it's quite an unusual perspective, but I appreciate this perspective greatly, and that is that the Buddha was a profound social reformer. And of course, he was a nonviolent in the most fundamental way and taught fundamental nonviolence.
Yes, great.
Roshi, you also mentioned that you yourself is a social activist and you offer teachings to the incarcerated, namely the Upaya prison project. Can you share more about what the project entails?
So I began this project in the mid-1990s when a student of mine who worked as a psychologist inside the prison system, she just got so burnt out and she asked me if I would come help her. So I worked inside on death row and maximum security for 6 years. I no longer do that work directly, but I'm very supportive of those in our community who do that work. And that work, for me, now I think the current project doesn't work with individuals on death row, but that was what I did. I worked only with men who had murdered people.
Oh.
And that work was very opening for me.
Wow.
Because I began to really understand how important it was to see the truth of suffering in other ways than I had identified as a person working in the end-of-life care field, where, that kind of suffering, as you encounter it, it naturally invokes compassion. But I realized that the state of mind that the men I worked with, the state of mind that they were in when they had caused such extreme suffering to others, was also suffering. And so it is not as if I denied the truth of their terrible actions, but I really began to practice in a way that was about rehumanization and non-objectification, seeing both the truth of their suffering, understanding accountability is essential, but at the same time, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, this was a wounded Buddha.
But we can understand that, but it's really hard. It looks kind of very hard to meet those people. So when you talk with them, how did you feel? I mean, did you feel any fear, or did you just feel, they are just human beings, we are just connected to each other? How did you feel?
Well, of course, I'm just a human being too.
Yeah.
And so before I went inside, I had a lot of thoughts or ideas or biases in relation to working with men, but also not only men, but men who had killed children, men who had killed their parents, men who had killed strangers and friends. So, my first day of working inside, I was a little bit intimidated. These were people who had tattoos all over the place. Tattooed tears down their cheeks representing people they had killed. They were, very big and physically big guys because, they had nothing to do inside the system but work out. So they were, physically very powerful men. And they weren't very friendly in the beginning. But actually, I was not charming. I didn't, put on some kind of nice face. I was interested, and I really cared about the work. I wanted to serve. And so very quickly, I became aware of my own prejudice, and I decided to look deeper than my prejudice. Wow. And that is that process of rehumanization about which I was speaking. And so in the process of that, I really came to love this work, even though it was very tough work to do. I went inside, into the penitentiary, a minimum of 3 times a week, sometimes for up to 5 hours of doing this work. And I learned a lot about suffering. I learned a lot about anger, about identity, about helplessness, about rage, about life.
Wow. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to our next question. You've lectured on the subject of death and dying around the world. And you've worked in the field of the end-of-life care as well. Could you please share with us your view on death and what your thoughts and beliefs are on it?
Well, death is inevitable. And in a way, we do it every exhale that we take. But I think that the encounter with our mortality on an existential level is really important in terms of our own psycho-spiritual development. That is to say, if we don't come to terms with the truth of our mortality, and certainly with the truth of impermanence, that everything will be extinguished sooner or later, including our sun. Of course, we're in the 6th mass extinction of species at this very time, in terms of what is happening vis-a-vis the climate. And so, understanding the truth of impermanence and also coming to terms with the truth of one's own mortality has a very profound effect on one's life, how we use our life, what our priorities are, how we take care of our relationships, how we actually think about the future and the legacies that we are going to be leaving for the future generations.
Right.
And also, death for me is a mystery. It's inevitable. But I can't say that I know it, because I won't really know it till I go through it. Though I have borne witness to many who have died in the course of the decades of work that I've done in this field.
I feel like you are kind of interested in the death or dying because you worked with the prisoners who killed other people, and it's related to the dying or death. And you're also working with people who will see their own deaths. So is there a reason that you become interested in death or dying?
I think that it really comes out of my early childhood experience of being catastrophically ill.
Oh.
And I was paralyzed on my left side. I had polio as a child. And also I lost my eyesight for 2 years. And so, as a result of that, I discovered I had an inner life. I wasn't, what could I say, I was 4 years old. So, I was existentially naive but curious. And as a result of that and how I was cared for, that certainly turned my life around. But my life took on a different tenor than many people that I grew up with, which was influenced, of course, by the ethos of the 1960s. And I ended up encountering Thich Nhat Hanh in the mid-1960s. And honestly, I was a social activist and very much involved in the civil rights and the anti-war movement. And I realized that I could be a contemplative and a social activist. Well, that work opened for me when I was a young anthropologist at Columbia University, working at the Bureau of Applied Social Research. Ended up going to Africa and observing a rite of passage that takes place once every 53 to 60 years in the Dogon culture. And I realized that the entire culture goes through a death and rebirth experience. And it just blew my mind wide open. And I came back to the United States, and I became, as an anthropologist, and I joined the faculty of the University of Miami School of Medicine. And there I saw that dying people were the most marginalized people in the hospital system. And I became very concerned, but also interested in, the existential questions related to mortality, the absence of, the exploration of pain and dying and death within our own medical educational system, and what that absence gave rise to. And then I began to work intensively with dying people from 1972 up until now. But now my work is primarily around training clinicians in care of the dying.
Yeah.
Because not only those who are dying who are suffering, but also clinicians.
Oh, yeah, great. And I heard that you have the Being with Dying program. So could you please explain more about that?
Yes, in the mid-90s, really because of the AIDS epidemic, and I was extremely involved in the care and coming alongside, many people who were dying of AIDS. And also, I was still sitting with people who were dying of cancer. And because I interacted so intensively with dying people for so many years, I had a chance to interact intensively with clinicians. And as I said, I saw clinicians who were not prepared to actually support people who were going through this last developmental phase of their lives, the phase of dying. And so it's in that moment I decided to not just work with dying people, but to create a training program for clinicians in care of the dying. And that training has, now we've trained thousands of clinicians. It was in part, to prepare clinicians to work with dying people.
Yeah.
But it was also very much directed toward the issues that we're seeing vividly now as a result of the COVID pandemic. And that is that the culture of medicine itself needs to transform.
Yeah.
It needs to rehumanize.
Yeah.
So we're very involved in these issues and in training programs, not only the Being with Dying training program, but a number of other training programs which are directed toward the exploration of an opening of the capacities related to how do we transform the culture of medicine.
That's great.
Especially in Korea right now, there is a lot of suicide, and it's one of the most highly suicidal rates of the OECD countries. And I understand that many people in Korea are actually facing death right now as we speak and experiencing intense sadness and fear. Would you be able to guide us in a very short meditation that can help us overcome such fear for the people that are watching this program? No,
I can't do that. It's not a short meditation.
Right.
And also, it's not a general. You can't generalize. People who feel profound futility, hopelessness, who have lost their taste for life. There's no quick fix.
Right.
In my estimation, and out of respect for the suffering of individuals, in the grip of such despair, I don't have a silver bullet. I don't think anyone does.
Yeah.
So yes, suicide in Korea. Also, I work in Japan. Suicide is epidemic in Japan.
Yeah.
And suicide is also an epidemic among young people in my country. This
so
is
sad.
a heartbreaking and challenging time we are in. For me, practice was life-saving. At Upaya just this past weekend, we had a wonderful short session with just young people. And that session was just, an intensive practice period. And I wasn't there, but my younger successors ran it. And I heard that it was really powerful because it gave young people a way to work with their minds when they're in the grip of suffering, but seeing the truth of impermanence.
Oh, so actually you are saying that we need to work on the grief and suffering of young people.
Absolutely. And there are many ways for doing that.
Yeah.
Practice, of course, is one.
Oh, so could you be a little bit specific for the programs for younger people? So how can we deal with those kind of grief and suffering for young people? So doing meditation, what kind of meditation do we need to do with them?
So I think that there are two things. One is the meditation practice, but I think the other thing is to engage young people in social service practice and, in experiences where they're fundamentally serving others, where they are altruistic. But in terms of contemplative practice, our approach is, a fundamentally Buddhist, but not hyper-sectarian approach. In other words, we invite people to actually bring, when they sit on their meditation cushion or in a chair, to bring attention to their posture, to bring attention to their breath, and let the body really settle. And then we do something which is not so typical of Zen. It's implicit in Zen, but it's not done directly, but we do it directly within our own center. And Ehe Dogen, who founded the Soto sect, of which I am a part, wrote a powerful fascicle called Hotsu Bodai Shin. And that fascicle emphasizes the value of the cultivation of selflessness and altruism, influencing the field of our practice. So compassion. And then the third phase has to do with, it's shamatha or suisokan. I don't know what you call it in Korean. But in any case, the development of concentration, really settling the mind. And from that, the cultivation of insight and then of choiceless awareness.
Great. So settling our mind and body, practicing, cultivating our compassion and concentration with mindfulness. Yeah, that's very great. But I actually want you to guide us a little short time of meditation. So could you help us to settle our mind and body or cultivate our compassion in for like 2 to 3 minutes?
Well, so I just actually published something called In a Moment, in a Breath. In a moment, in a breath, and there are 55 short meditations.
Yeah, so please.
Yeah. So I just would like to invite us to take a moment. And on the next in-breath, bring our attention to the sensation of the inhalation and of the exhale. And simply, lightly be with that experience physically of attention on the breath. Being with the in-breath and the out-breath. Now shift your attention to the sensation of your sits bones on your cushion or your chair. Really feel this floor or cushion or chair supporting your practice. And allow your attention to rest with the sensation, the connection of your sits bones on the chair or cushion. Letting yourself be grounded and rooted. Taking just this moment through that experience of connection to invite yourself into a kind of stability. Breath deep in the body. Attention on the sits bones, the sensation of being seated, firmly seated. And gently shift your attention to your back. Strong back. Grounded, but also upholding yourself in the midst of any conditions that are present for you right now. Being balanced, being upright, being flexible, strong back. And breath deep in the body. Now shift your attention to the front part of your body. Soft front, open. Your capacity to allow the world to enter your experience. soft front, and for yourself to be touched by the truth of suffering, to let your basic compassion emerge. Strong back, soft front, not turning away from whatever is arising in the present moment. Letting your strong back uphold you in your open front, providing the means for you to be present and mindful, connected, and breath deep in the body. So thank you for these few moments of practice, and may they benefit others. These moments. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have arrived here and now. I feel this improves the awareness of contextualization. So I feel like I'm being aware of the context of this environment, of this atmosphere with
Wonderful.
my body. Yeah, thank you. So let's now move on to the topic of life and how to live well in Korea. So how to live well. So in Korea, it used to be community-based and we had a collective culture, but now it's very much focused on the idea that we are all individual and we must find out our own ways to survive. So given this cultural viewpoint, what advice could you give to someone living in this type of society?
Well, I think that view is highly problematic.
Yes.
I very much appreciate Thich Nhat Hanh's coining of the term interbeing.
Yeah.
So if we're all just living for ourselves, it's going to be a pretty rough world. And if we don't see our relationship with the natural world, with the trees, with the grasses, with the air, with the rivers, with the oceans, with each other, that we're part of, a Mahasangha, a greater community of interbeing. Whether we characterize it using a Buddhist term like pratityasamutpada or interbeing, or Sangha, Mahasangha, or whatever, this notion of, hyper-individualism is, it's a source of a lot of suffering.
Yes.
So we better get over it. And, I feel like, the climate catastrophe, but also the suffering young people experience at this time. Many are being forced to look more deeply at what life means and what life is and what reality is.
Yes.
We are not separate from the context of our lived experience. I was in Korea years ago, and I was like, oh my God, so many apartment buildings and so much asphalt and so much concrete. This is very tough on the body, heart, and mind, and on building community.
So tensed, yeah. And I think the grace meditation, that's a little bit connected to the compassion meditation, right? So could you explain more about the grace meditation?
So I was very fortunate to be appointed as a distinguished visiting scholar at the Library of Congress. And so I could, lift out of my teaching administrative duties at Upaya. And I went to Washington and spent a good deal of time working in the library, developing a heuristic map of compassion, because I saw that in my work with clinicians, that clinicians and patients, but clinicians themselves were suffering from what is called a compassion deficit, and that the outcome for them and for clinicians in the institutions is really devastating. And I wanted to, the sort of conventional Buddhist approaches to compassion training didn't make sense to me. I mean, made sense to me. I'd done, many of them and trained, but I saw that it was very difficult to train, secular individuals in compassion using these more sectarian approaches. And so as a result of that, I thought I have to understand what compassion is. And I saw that compassion is actually composed of non-compassion elements.
Yes.
And those elements include attention, intention, somatic awareness, and so on and so forth, and insight, and then engagement. And so, I did this very complex map that was based on not only on Buddhism, but also on research in neuroscience and social psychology in relation to compassion. And it was out of this that I realized the map was very powerful and, was I think very helpful for others to understand compassion. But I realized I needed to develop a tool that clinicians could use as a way to cultivate compassion when they are in the midst of interacting with someone who was suffering, whether it was a patient or a family member or another clinician or whomsoever. So that is when I developed this intervention called G.R.A.C.E.
Yeah.
And the G of G.R.A.C.E. stands for gathering your attention. The R of G.R.A.C.E. is recalling your intention. The A of G.R.A.C.E. is attuning to yourself physically, emotionally, and cognitively, and then expanding your subjectivity to experience empathy, to sense into the somatic, affective, and cognitive experience of another, that's empathy. And from that base, then, the C of G.R.A.C.E. is considering what will really serve. Not coming out of your biases or even your knowledge set, but going much more deeply into insight. And then the E of G.R.A.C.E. is engaging and ending. So now that tool is being used in many different ways, including, in contexts of education and training people in human rights work and so on. And it's a very big program in Japan, which is wonderful.
Oh.
And there's the National G.R.A.C.E. Association and G.R.A.C.E. study groups in various parts of Japan.
It's wonderful. So you visit Japan often?
Yes, that is the case.
And at the time, please come to Korea.
Well, thank you.
Okay. So there are the questions we are asking all the meditation masters we are interviewing. And first, as a Buddhist practitioner and meditation practitioner, what are you mindful of on a daily basis? What do you keep in mind living your daily life?
I think my priority really is, how can I serve?
Oh.
That's it. What can I do to be of benefit to not just others, but, to the world? And, whether it's not using the gas stove so often, it's many small acts. I live in the mountains quite often, where I am now, and we're completely off-grid. So, we're dependent, for example, on rainwater, which comes off our roof. We're not taking water from, a lake or a river that would nourish the land. We're dependent on the sun for the energy. So, that I'm able to speak to you right now is because of the solar panels on the roof of this little log cabin in the mountain.
Oh.
So, it's not just the big acts. Like, I think it's wonderful to engage in, compassion-based projects like the Prison Project and being with dying, or our work in the Himalayas. I think this is all great. And it's been very uplifting and energizing for me as a woman in, now in my 80s, in my, 9th decade. But really, it's in the small acts of our everyday life that things show up in terms of who we are vis-a-vis our character. And I tend to be quite stern with myself. You know, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time. And I correct course all the time. You know, I try to live, you know, with strength and mindfulness. And I also feel that sensibility is very important for all of us to have. The word is conscientiousness. How can we be more conscientious?
Oh, so touched. Yeah.
Right. I think in Korea, we live in a very affluent country, and we live in a very affluent society compared to a lot of the countries in the world. But we still, you know, experience pain and suffering in our lives. Continuing with being conscientious, what can we be conscientious in our daily life to help us live in a happy and healthy way?
So I think what is very important is not to turn away from the truth of suffering by, indulging in diversionary activities, dispersive activities. In other words, it's important to cultivate the quality of mind that sees clearly, and a heart that feels deeply, and to actualize your life out of a sense of moral beauty, and do the best that you can. And to stay aware, you know, we're just humans. Even we've seen His Holiness the Dalai Lama become irritated, you know. And you know, just as we're all just human beings, we're all learning all the time. If we allow ourselves to look, to take account, and to correct course, and to renew our vows not to harm.
Very good.
Right. Thank you so much for all of your insights and your wisdom.
Yes, we really appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody watching this does too. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for your time today, Roshi. Today we visited the Upaya Zen Center located in Santa Fe, New Mexico. For me, the social engagement programs they offer was very inspirational, and I'd love to visit them soon.
Yes, as Buddhism expands globally, it's developing in ways that fit the culture and situation of each country. US Buddhism is strongly characterized by being engaged. So I believe that meditation plays an important role in positively transforming not only an individual's life, but also society.
Here at Go Inside Global, we embark on a journey to various meditation centers around the world. This season, we will visit meditation centers in the US. Please join us again in our next episode.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will see you again soon. Thank you.